Fungi, just like bacteria, like to grow in warm and moist environments. That's where they grow best. That's why you'll see mushrooms growing under the cover of leaves and things where it's moist and warm. Now, most fungi are multicellular, however, some of them are unicellular. An example of a unicellular fungi that only has one cell is yeast, which is used in making bread to make the bread rise. That's a type of fungi, but it's actually only one cell, so it's the unicellular form. As far as multicellular fungi, we'll look at a little diagram here of the basic structure of something that would be a multicellular fungi. This is a mushroom. You can see that it has a cap and a stem, just like a typical mushroom, and right underneath the cap there are the gills, and beneath the fruit body, the part that actually grows underground, we call the mycelium, and mycelium are what are known as the roots of the fungi, so instead of saying that it has roots, we say it has mycelium. Let's look at some of the other parts of the structure of multicellular fungi. So, multicellular fungi are made up of thread-like filaments. If you could look at them under a microscope, you would see all of these filaments, and they're called hyphae. And there's lots of different kinds of hyphae that make up the fungi, or the fungus. And hyphae form out of fungal spores. Spores are the way that fungi usually reproduce. So the spores grow into hyphae, which are these filaments which develop into a mushroom or whatever type of fungus you're looking at. Now, like we said, the roots of the fungus are called mycelium, and mycelium are made of these filaments, these hyphae, and there's several different types of hyphae that make up the mycelium, and they have different responsibilities. So these hyphae are responsible for stabilizing the fungus, keeping it upright so that it doesn't fall over. They're responsible for invading a food source because they're decomposers, so they need to be able to invade things that are decomposing or things that are dead so that they can get nutrients out of them. And they're also responsible for forming reproductive structures so that the fungus can reproduce. So this is what's happening in the roots of the fungus and the different kinds of hyphae that make up the mycelium. Now, all fungi have cell walls, and most of them have cell walls made out of chitin. Chitin's a really important material in the fungi kingdom, so if you hear chitin, you need to think fungi. And chitin is a complex carbohydrate. It's a polysaccharide, and it gives the cell wall strength and flexibility, and that flexibility is something that's unique to the chitin. If you think about the cell walls of plants, they're much more rigid. Cell walls of fungi are more flexible. So that's what makes them special. Now, all fungi are heterotrophs, which means they have to get their food from other sources. They can't make their own food like plants do. So most of them are decomposers, and they use a process called external digestion, where they send out chemicals that digest the food outside of the surface of the fungus. And then the fungus absorbs the digested products after they've been broken down. So it's sort of the opposite of what happens when we eat. Our food is digested inside of our bodies. It's the opposite with fungus or fungi because they digest their food outside of their bodies. There's several different types of feeding relationships that fungi use to be able to get their food. Saprophytes are what we've been talking about as decomposers. It's another word for decomposer. So they feed on waste or dead organic material, things that are decomposing. There's also mutualists, which live in a symbiotic relationship with another organism. So you can think about things that kind of work together in relationships. So sometimes, instead of actually decomposing dead material, they can work together with another organism to get food from it, but without harming it. And then the last type of feeding relationship are parasites that absorb nutrients from the living cells of their hosts. So parasites are usually thought of in a negative way because they sort of rob the host cells of that nutrients without doing anything to benefit the other organism. And then for reproduction, fungi have several different means of reproduction. They can reproduce either sexually or asexually, and the types of reproduction can include budding, where they just bud off of an original structure, so they produce more organisms just by budding off. There's fragmentation, where you can break off a piece of a fungus and it'll continue to grow. Or they can reproduce by spores, which is the way that mold reproduces. If you think about bread mold, it sends up these little spores, and that causes it to spread to other parts of the decomposing material. So that's the kingdom fungi in a nutshell.